that. So if there's any questions, don't be scared. But we want to make sure to make the feature deep dive available for everyone. Okay. Very small group today. I love it. So today, as Casey mentioned, we're going to be talking about add-ins within the engagement builder solution. So primarily, I'll just be going to the add-in screen within Extensibility, showing you all the various types of add-ins that you could add to any of your forms. Next slide here. As a reminder, our sessions are on the first and third Tuesday of every month from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. The first Tuesday, such as today's session, is when we are focused on a feature deep dive, going through a specific tool or functionality with the Engagement Builder solution, and then we'll open it up to a Q&A at the end. And then our third Tuesday is only an open Q&A session for any questions or assistance that you need as you're building out forms or trying to manage your forms. Today, we really need to get rid of this agenda slide. Welcome and recap, live session roadmap, add-ins and extensibility, and closing and resources. Add-ins and extensibility, there's quite a few items we'll be going over, some communication, notification items, how we can manage the data through data sources, summary reports, and API integrations. Ways that we can generate documents when a submission is made. We can add CAPTCHA, redirect to other web pages once a submission is made, so kind of how we handle the actual flow of that submission. And then payments and files. So we can, of course, accept payment, which we'll talk a little bit about, and then we can also have files available for download as well. We will go ahead and get started. Switch over screens here. If Teams will cooperate. Okay. Perfect. Here's Engagement Builder. I'm going to go ahead and log in at the top right here. Go ahead and go to the administrator. Yeah, it's ready. Here is perfect. I'll take me back to the Engagement Builder site and go ahead and go to the admin dashboard here. I'm going to go ahead and go to the Sites tab and locate an existing engagement that I've already set up. I'll do my demo form as an example. I'll click on the pencil icon on the right side so that I can go ahead and go to the form editor for this. And then I'm going to navigate to the add-ins tab here on the left side. Perfect. Once I'm here, I'll just step through one by one through each of these. The first one is a generated PDF. So as you may or may not be familiar with by now, Engagement Builder automatically generates what's referred to as the default PDF when a submission is made. If I were to locate a particular submission within the Submissions tab here, go ahead and pull up my demo form, put the date a little further back. And then let's go ahead and open this up. I, of course, can view all the submitted data here, but in addition, under the Files tab, there's this Submission PDF, also referred to as the default PDF, that is automatically generated. If I were to go ahead and download this to my computer and open that up within my browser, we'll see that it is a PDF that automatically includes all of the submission details from the individual. So it'll include the form name, the date and time that was submitted, and then all of the information here is expected down below. This can be included in a number of ways. This can be downloaded by you as an administrative user when you're viewing the submission data, as I just did within that Submissions tab. This also is presented via the form submitted successfully pop-up to the submitter when they send that submission over. And then in addition, we can also include these in notifications, which I'll show in just a little bit. That is the default PDF. But let's say that I take a look at the default PDF here and I realize that I don't want to include these amounts as an example. There's specific information that I actually want to omit from the actual generated PDF. That is where you would use that generated PDF add-in to customize what information is available there. It still would be in that same format where it just lists out all of the form data. There's no customization to exactly what that would look like, but you can choose whether or not to include or exclude particular information. So if I didn't want to include the introduction section as an example, I could just go ahead and deselect it from the visible elements, and it will no longer be available within that generated PDF. You can also customize the file name of the generated file as well. If you wanted to make it something more specific. Otherwise, the default, if I remember correctly, is just submission.pdf or application.pdf. So this basically allows a little more customization with those default PDFs that are generated out of a submission. Moving on to the next add-in here, we have the stamped PDF option. Stamped PDF allows you to take an existing fillable PDF that has fillable form fields within it. This is something that you would have generated in an external application such as Adobe Acrobat or Adobe Reader or any of those applications. And then you would want to map that to information that is being submitted within the form itself. To add this add-in, just click the add button there. If I scroll down, this is where I could upload an editable PDF. Let me see if I have an example. I actually think I do. Documents. Let's do this. So if I were to upload a fillable PDF that already has those fields built into it, all I have to do is locate the document from my computer here, upload it to the Engagement Builder solution. It will list out every single field that is available within that form. Then what I can do is I can start to map the fields to the fields on the Engagement Builder side to determine what information should be filled into it. That way, when the submission is made, it automatically fills in that information, and that stamped PDF is available to them, whether that's through the pop-up, that form submitted successfully message that they'll receive, or through an email notification. And similarly to the default PDF, you guys would be able to see that generated document when you're viewing the submission data as well within that submissions tab. These also don't have to be one-to-one. If you instead of referencing an element, wanted to switch this to something like a calculation, where you're more doing text concatenation and combining things together to get the exact output that you want into those particular fields, you can leverage calculations for that purpose as well, and then reference everything that you need to reference. There is also the ability to include static information here. That's probably a little less likely for your guys' use cases, or for most people's use cases, I should say, since you would more likely build that information into the PDF itself, but that is an option depending on how you need to fill that information in. Similarly to the generated PDF add-in that we just discussed, we can customize things like the file name as well. That would be presented. Perfect. Moving on to the next add-in here, that is notifications. So this would be sending an email notification out of the Engagement Builder solution directly to an individual. Most likely, this is going to be to the original submitter, telling them next steps, or thank you for your submission, or anything of that nature, notifying them of where the status of the submission is at. This could potentially be used for internal notifications as well, though. If you wanted to put a static email that an administrator on your team gets notified every single time a submission is made, you could absolutely use that notification add-in for it. The example that I already have here built in within my form is an example of emailing the individual that made the submission. So if I click on the existing notification that I already have built here, The to email address, I can use the element selector right here to just go ahead and select from my form where I need to pull that email address from. So the very important thing to remember with notifications is I have to pull whatever email address I'm sending this from somewhere. Whether that is because I statically put it in because that's for an internal notification, or because I'm requesting that information from the user to be able to send that email. I have to be provided with that email address in some capacity. So I'm going ahead and selecting that element right here, and that is who it will go to. If you want to send it to multiple email addresses, you can just press the green add button right here and add as many as needed. There is also the ability to add carbon copy and blind carbon copy as well, if you wanted to include additional individuals on that. One use case of this might be that you want to send this notification to the original form submitter, but you want to BCC internally, so you guys are aware that that submission has come through. You guys could just statically put, whatever admin email address that might be right here, and then you would automatically be notified or BCC'd on that email that gets sent out to the original submitter. As we scroll down, this is where we'll customize the actual content of that email. So we can put the subject that we want that email to have. We also have the ability, anytime that you see this toggle right here with this little T and a vertical line, you can switch this over to the element selector with this little list icon. So I could reference an element that is within the submitted form data, or I could use a calculation as well. Why I especially point this out for things like subjects is that if there is a unique identifier or an application ID or anything of that sort that might be helpful to include in the email so that the individual knows what this is for, you could use a calculation to start doing various text concatenation and combine together static text and variables from the form to make it a little more personalized and understandable to the user on what this notification, what this form that they submitted is. For this example, I'll just switch this back to the subject here. For submission to Additionally, down here, we can customize the body of this email as well. The default option should be an HTML email that'll allow for a little more customization, being able to use the actual WYSIWYG editor here to bold text, italicize text, change the alignment, allow for lists, include links, images, etc. There is also the option for a plain text email as well. It will not include those options. So if you're ever trying to customize an email and you're like, why do I not have the ability to bold any text or add calculations or make this a list or anything like that, you'll just need to switch that over to the HTML email option, and then you'll have all of those options provided to you. Similarly to the subject, we can also switch this to have an element selector or a calculation. But in most instances, I would just switch this to HTML. By far, 99.9% of use cases, you're going to want to use the body HTML option. As mentioned, this allows you to fully customize the text within here. So if I wanted to bold Demo County as an example, I can just highlight that text and click the bold icon. But there are a whole host of options that I can use to customize these. I have heading options, a variety of inline options. I can make them various blocks, change the alignment. I can change the font accordingly with all of these font options, and then change the size of the font as well. We also have the ability to insert calculations into HTML emails as well. This is using the little calculation insert button right here within that WYSIWYG editor that says insert and edit a calculation. If I click this right here, I will get this pop-up where I will need to name the calculation. This is just so when you are interacting and editing the form or the body of that email rather right here, that you know what that's referring to or what calculation that is, and then you'll build out that calculation separately. So the existing example that I have right here is I want to insert the first name of the individual into the email. I can click on the little calculation editor right here and then reference the form data. So from that contact information page, insert the first name that they're already entering in. And that's how I'm able to inject information or data directly into the form. So I can make this a little more customized. I can say hello first name rather than just every email that gets sent to everyone saying just hello. Within this email as well, I can customize some additional attachments. So that default PDF that we talked about before, that by default includes all of the information contained within the submission, I can automatically include this as a part of that notification. So that's just a quick toggle on. I can also include to attach any files that were uploaded by the submitter as a part of that submission process. So if I required them to upload a proof of something or any sort of attachment, I can also include that within the email notification. This one is a little more trickier of an option to enable. Most mail servers restrict the size of emails that can be sent. And so what we find often is that individuals or administrators that have this option enabled will every once in a while run into a use case where the size of the attached files exceeds what can actually be sent or received by a mail server and will not correctly send that notification. For that reason, I only recommend enabling this if you know that the files that are being uploaded are very small. Otherwise, I would just go ahead and disable this, making sure that we don't run into any issues with actually sending those email notifications. We do also have the ability to only attach specific uploaded files. This is using an element selector here. So I would just reference whatever file upload field that I have within my form, select it here. This also provides me the option to customize what the file name in that attachment actually would be. So if I didn't want it to just be what was, originally uploaded, maybe they uploaded it and it was application 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, blah, 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 all that stuff. I could instead customize that so it's application for John Doe.pdf or however I want to customize that. So this also is very beneficial if you guys have a review step or many intermediary steps where you guys are providing documents that need to be sent in an email notification to the individual. You can just reference that review form or that review upload field here and then customize the file name, and it's automatically provided as part of that email notification. There is also the ability, if you're attaching the default PDF, to customize what the name of that file is. You'll see the example here. I'm doing some text concatenation with first name, last name to customize what that looks like. And then I can also attach other files as well. So this is how, if I have things such as the stamped PDF that have automatically been generated as a part of that submission process, I can go ahead and select those from the options here. I haven't assigned any names to these, which is why you see a couple of blank items here, but these are the generated PDF and the stamped PDF. Perfect. Moving on to the next add-in here, we have a file download. So this is if I would want some sort of file to be uploaded on our end and made available for download within the solution. It's kind of similar to the generated PDF and the stamped PDF, where Engagement Builder is making the file available, but you would likely have another process, whether that be an email notification or a part of the form submitted successfully pop up or anything like that, that actually makes that available at some location. So this is just saying, I want to be able to upload a static file and have it available for download in some way. So here I could customize what that file label is, whether that's included as a part of the default submission process. I can create a calculation to customize what that file name looks like if I would like. And then I go ahead and I select the file that would be uploaded here. Fairly straightforward, very similar to the generated PDF and stamped PDF, of course, with just a lot less functionality with it. Moving on to the next one here is payment. So as you guys may or may not be familiar, Tyler, Colorado works with SIPA to be able to provide payment processing solutions as well. Those are through a couple of separate applications, our common checkout page and our transaction processing engine. We can actually link Engagement Builder to those services to be able to collect payment as a part of the submission process. In order to make service codes or payment configurations available within your instance, that does require a project through SIPA that we would complete on our side to get those service codes up and running, add all of the customize the checkout experience exactly as expected, and then they would be available within the payment configuration options here within this dropdown. Then moving forward with any forms that would need payment on them, you would select that payment configuration and then be able to customize all of the items that are being paid for and pre-populate some information into that checkout experience. The local reference ID is a unique identifier that gets passed into the payment engine that can help relate items back to your submissions. So there is the option here to customize exactly what that looks like. You can reference an element if you'd like to automatically pull in information from your form. And then there's also the ability to input a calculation as well. One of the caveats that I'd like to point out with the local reference ID field is that there is a cap on exactly how many characters can get passed into our payment engine. For that reason, if it's ever questionable on how many characters might be included in what you're trying to use as the local reference ID, I would always reference a calculation and use the text option to use this get partial text option where you would start at character 1 and limit to 48 characters because that is the maximum number of characters that's allowed to be accepted into our payment engine when this information gets passed over. Then you can just use the get partial text from here to customize exactly what's being pulled in. So if I wanted to pull in the user's first name, and that's how I customize it, I could do that. If I wanted to do a text concatenation of first name and last name, that's where I could start to use text concatenation calculations. I know we haven't fully talked about calculations, so a lot of this might be a little confusing, but we'll of course have a future upcoming session where we talk about calculations in further depth as well. Moving on down, if I wanted to default a payment type, I can do that. Typically, I don't recommend it so that a user can select during the checkout experience exactly what payment type that they would like to use, but you do have the ability to populate that if you would like. There is also the ability to add custom text to the receipt that is generated out of the common checkout page. This is the receipt that would not only be displayed on page when the user presses submit payment, but also to the emailed receipt as well. If you wanted to include a little bit of information at the top, you can customize that as needed. Of course, as with all the other options we've discussed here, you can make that some sort of static text, or you could leverage calculations as an example where you're starting to pull in information from their form to customize exactly what that looks like. We can also customize things such as the submit button. So if payment is required, it's determined that payment is required, we can customize exactly how that's presented to the user. By default, as it's listed here, it'll say continue to payment. But if we wanted to customize it to say continue to checkout or however we want to customize that, we can do so accordingly. The billing information is fairly straightforward. This is information that gets entered onto the checkout screen that a user would have to manually enter regardless. This allows for pre-populating that information in to make the checkout experience a little more streamlined. The reason being, if you're already collecting some of this information that they're going to be entering into the checkout screen within the form, then we can just go ahead and pre-populate that information in, and they don't have to enter it a second time. So with things like billing name, we might want to pull in first name and last name. We need to do a text concatenation and leverage a calculation for that. We can do so here. Maybe we want to automatically pull the email that we're requesting from the form. We could do so accordingly. They do have the ability to change it when they actually get to the checkout page. Though I'll admit in experience, they're less likely to do so. One of the caveats that can kind of get complex with is that our payment processor, the contact information that they're providing during that checkout screen needs to match what's on file with the cardholder information. So if you're pre-populating information such as an address and that doesn't match what's on the card, they are going to get an error during that checkout process where it didn't connect to address verification. So keep in mind if what they're entering into the form might not match their cardholder information, that might not be something that we want to pre-populate in. Things like phone numbers and email addresses, of course, we're not checking that with their cardholder information. So that's a little less of a problem to go ahead and pre-populate in, but just keep that in mind. With the payment app items down here below, this is where we customize what is actually being paid for as a part of the submission process. We can customize these to have a SKU. The SKU is very flexible as to what you want to put in there. I typically will do, 1 word, 2 words, something in all caps that just identifies this is the particular identifier for the item that's being paid for. Description is going to be something that explains in a little more text exactly what's being paid for here. So I could do test transaction rather than just a SKU of test. I can even, as we've talked about before, reference elements or start to do calculations where now I'm pulling in information that they're actually entering during the form process to make it a little more customized and actually explain what's being paid for. The unit price here, I could make a static text or use a calculation to determine exactly what the purchase price of this is. Quantity, I could set to 1, if they're paying for 5 of these items, I could set it accordingly. The main thing that I want to make clear with unit price and quantity is that Engagement Builder determines whether items are being paid for so long as unit price is greater than 0 and quantity is greater than 0. So if any of those are 0 or some sort of negative value, that's a weird edge case that likely would happen. But if any of those determine 0, then it's not going to request payment from the user. You can actually use this to your benefit. Because if there is an option within your form where you want users to be say, I'll pay now or I'll pay later, you could create a calculation that uses a logic operator that says if the option selected is pay now, then let's set this to 1. Otherwise, let's set this to 0. This starts to customize, okay, what items are actually being paid for within that submission process. You can have multiple items listed out here and have that same kind of logic here as well, where maybe, for example, an application fee is always paid for. So I have an app fee and then application fee, and this is always going to be set to 20 or set to a quantity of 1, with a purchase price of $20. But this test transaction item only gets paid now when the option pay now or some specific option is chosen. We can build out all of those payment items accordingly and make sure only the items that need to be paid for at the time of submit are being paid for. I know that might be a little confusing. Payment definitely has a lot of nuance to it, especially if there are any questions at the end of this session during our Q&A session. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you guys have around that. Moving on to the next option here, we have the review page. So a review page is an optional feature where before a user actually presses submit, they are presented with a page that shows everything that they've already completed. That is customized by literally just adding it to the form. And then here you choose which items are actually presented within that review page. So by default, it's going to have everything selected that they've completed. But let's say, for an example, I don't care for them to be like to see the introduction section when they're actually reviewing the form. I can go ahead and disable that here, and it will disable all of the sub options for this as well. So they won't see anything within that introduction section. The next item we have here is a post-submission redirect. So if we want to automatically redirect the user to an external web page or a particular web page after they press submit, I can customize that here. I can set exactly what page I want to redirect them to. And then I have a couple of options here for skipping the confirmation dialog. So this is if a user presses submit, are we just going to skip over that dialog? Or are we going to have the confirmed submission pop up? And then additionally, once they actually do submit, do we want to show the pop-up that says the form is submitted successfully, or do we just want to automatically redirect instead? Moving on to the next one, CAPTCHA. So if we want to, within the pop-up, asking for confirming the submission, have the user clear a CAPTCHA to make sure we aren't flooded with any bot or spam submissions. We can easily just add these to our form. All you do is add the element to the form. There's nothing else to customize here, and it will automatically be shown within the pop-up. The next item that we have here is a success message. So after a user presses submit, they get a pop-up saying form submitted successfully. You do actually have the ability to customize that pop-up and include additional information to the user. You simply just add the add-in to your form here, and then you'll customize out this content section. This content section works very similarly to the HTML body that we completed earlier, where I can include static content, but actually insert variables or calculations into it as well to start to inject information. I can also choose whether or not it's actually displayed to a user dependent on some sort of condition. And I can invert it and do a display of values to match condition here as well. This is very nice if you want to set the expectation as to what will happen after a user presses submit. So if there's a review process on your guys' side or some fulfillment process that needs to happen, you can say, thank you for your submission. It may take an additional 2 to 3 weeks for you to hear from our organization, etc. And very much customize that. The next items that we have here all have to deal with data sources. So when a user submits form data over, we have the ability to insert data into a new data source row. We have the ability to update existing data source rows, and we have the ability to delete particular data source rows as well. As a reminder for anyone who's unfamiliar, data sources are essentially data tables that we have stored in the Engagement Builder solution, in which we can push information into or also pull information from as a user interacts with or submits to a form. So if I want to automatically insert a new row when a user makes a submission, I'll just click on the Insert Data Source Row option here. I select which data table I would like to insert that information into. And then I also have a context option here as well. Context is really only beneficial when we are dealing with things like repeatable regions. So if I wanted to potentially enter in multiple pieces of data because multiple pieces of data were provided, so I want multiple rows representing each piece of information that was provided, I could select the element here, for example, my repeatable region. This contact section within my existing form is a repeatable region in which a user can provide multiple people's contact information. So I can go ahead and here and just say, for every first name that I'm provided, let's go ahead and insert a new row. Then within my data, I can start to map items together. So I could do a name and reference the first name that's provided. I could do the date and reference a date field that's within the form. These are all the columns and pieces of data that is going to be inserted for that particular context or that particular row that we're inserting. I do also have the ability to update instead if some sort of condition is met. So if I want to prevent duplicates within my data source, maybe I have a check to make sure that the name isn't already a name that exists within my data source. Because if it is, then I just want to go ahead and update the columns that are already there with the new information that I'm being provided, rather than complete or create a complete new row. Of course, that kind of segues into our update data source row item that we have here. So if I'm always expecting to be able to update existing information rather than to provide new information, I could use this update data source row option. Similarly, I will select the data source that I want to update the rows on. I could do the context if I have a repeatable region or similar pieces of information that I'm inserting that I want to update multiple rows with. And then I would filter. I want to check ones where the name already equals the name that I have within my form. And then here's the data that I want to update. Moving on to the next one, delete data source row. Very, very, very similar. Instead of where I would update existing column data, I'm just going to completely delete rows that match a certain filter criteria. So if I want to delete all rows that match the first name that was provided during the form, the submission process, then those will automatically be deleted after the user presses submit. We also have a summary report option. So summary reports are sent on a 24-hour basis. If I remember correctly, they're sent at 6 p.m. Mountain Time to the individual whose email address is provided within this configuration here. So you can choose whether you want this as a fixed width report format or a CSV. I would typically recommend the CSV format since that's typically how reports are sent in most applications. If I wanted multiple rows, very similar to our data source updates and inserts representing multiple pieces of data within a form, I could reference, for example, my repeatable region here within that context. And then I can customize exactly what columns are included within that. The nice thing is it doesn't have to match one-to-one with the information that's being provided within the form. If I wanted to do calculations and concatenate multiple pieces of information together, all of that stuff, I could do that with the calculation input here as well. You can customize the name of that report, and then the recipient type here, the only option is email. So you'll say who on the administrative side is this going to be emailed to on that 24-hour basis? Do we want to CC anyone, blind carbon copy anyone? And then we can also customize the subject of that email and the body of that email. One of the caveats to this is that no matter whether or not submissions have been made within that 24-hour window, it will still send an email regardless. So just note that if you do set this up, you may receive an email that doesn't contain any data because no submissions have been made within that 24-hour window. And again, those emails get sent at approximately 6 p.m. Mountain Time. There's unfortunately no way to customize when those get sent. So that is out of the box what is available. And then finally, API integrations. This one's kind of a heavy hitter, so I don't think I'll be able to talk too in depth on API integrations here. But this essentially is how you would be able to take information from the Engagement Builder solution and put it into an external service after a submission has been made. When you set up API integrations here, you can set up a notification URL This would be a notification on that external service that gets notified that, hey, a new submission has come through. There's new submission data that you can go ahead and pick up. How that works on the external services side is that it will go to a specific endpoint within Engagement Builder, leverage what's referred to as the API mark here, which is kind of a unique identifier to grab from a queue and automatically pull that information in. It would pull that information into its service and then mark it as fetched or mark it as completed within that queue. We also have the ability to set up authorizations within here as well, basic authentication. So if the external service needs to, or if we want to lock that down a little more, just making sure somebody doesn't happen across the endpoint and pull a bunch of submission data, you can set up a username and password that the external service would use as well. When it goes to fetch that submitted data from that endpoint, it would by default use a unique identifier for each one of those fields that's represented here within the form. That can be a little difficult because if you guys ever make changes to your forms over time, or things get deleted, re-added, whatever that might be, that's going to have an effect on your external service that's expecting to go and pull that submitted data. That's why we always recommend, if you are using an API integration, anytime that you create fields and customize your fields here, leverage the API ID field here. That is the unique identifier that that external service would use when it goes and fetches all of your field information, that field data, that submission data, at that particular endpoint. This makes sure that at any point in time, if you do happen to delete and re-add a field, you can just reset up that API ID, and it's not some random string of letters and numbers that is set up that your external service doesn't know how to use. API integrations can go very in-depth. One of the resources that I will turn you guys to, if you guys are ever interested in API integrations, if you go to eb-training.colorado.gov, navigate to the user manual tab on the top here. This is a whole host of resources that are made available by our product team. And the first one that you'll see on top here is API integration. This talks about all the various types of API integrations that we support within the Engagement Builder solution. The one that is within the add-ins tab is the submissions API endpoint integration. This is trying to take information from Engagement Builder and put it into some external application. It's not the other way around. It's not pulling information into Engagement Builder. So this explains in full detail exactly what endpoints are available, anything like that. So, I think that covers everything that I wanted to go over today with add-ins. I think with that being said, we have our live session roadmap right here. Our next one in September will be on workflows and best practices around them. And we've got a few other upcoming sessions as well. Calculations is especially one that I'm wanting to go over because I think there's a lot that can be used within calculations, and I know they can be very confusing. So hopefully that will provide that. But we make our live session roadmap available on the training website. So there is always a heads up as to what our sessions are about, in case there's ones that you're interested in, maybe ones that you're a little less interested in. You guys can pick and choose which you want to attend. Anyways, that concludes the feature deep dive section of this. We'll go ahead and open it up to Q&A now. Is there anybody who has any questions or anything that you guys are working on that we can help kind of walk you through? I think we can go ahead and get this closed out. Thank you, everyone. Our next session will be on August 18th at 10 a.m. And that will be our Q&A session. So any questions or anything you guys are working through, feel free to hop on there. If you guys are ever interested in starting a new project with us, enhancements that you're trying to do to your Engagement Builder forms or payment you're trying to set up, we also have that information available on the EB training website. But I think with that, with that, I think we're all good. Cool.
We'll see you next time and tell your friends.
Yeah.